Why did no one ever look her in the eye? That was the thought that lingered as Lena Ortiz adjusted her grip on the battered thermos, its metal warm against her palm. The base was alive with chatter, the shuffle of boots, the clang of equipment being dragged down corridors, but to her, it was always background noise. Invisible threads in a place where she moved like a ghost. They thought they knew her, just another contractor, just another pair of hands to keep their rusting machines alive a little longer. But silence had weight, and hers was heavier than they would ever guess. She pushed open the comms wing door, the smell of stale air rushing out like an old breath held too long. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, buzzing faintly, casting everything in that washed-out glow that made days feel endless. Dust floated in the beams, stirred by the whir of tired fans. To anyone else, this was just another morning in Fort Vance's forgotten corner, the comms wing that time had left behind. To Lena, though, it was different today. The faintest vibration of unease pressed against her chest, though she couldn't say why. The desk clerk barely raised his eyes from the glow of his phone as she passed. She nodded out of habit, the gesture landing uselessly in the air between them. He didn't return it. He never did. Lena set her toolbox down beside the central console. The machine looked the way old soldiers sometimes did, scarred, weary, but still standing. Its casing bore scratches, its fans groaned when pushed too hard, and yet it carried the weight of responsibility no one trusted to newer models. A relic still vital, much like her. She rolled up her sleeves, exposing the faintest trace of a scar on her wrist. A line most would mistake for an accident with machinery. They would never imagine it came from something else, nights in locked rooms where mistakes had no margin. She ignored the phantom ache and reached for her tools. "Careful, Ortiz," came a voice from behind. Lieutenant Mark Barrett leaned casually against the wall, his paper cup of coffee steaming in his hand. Two junior operators flanked him, hanging on his words like shadows. "If you fix that thing too well, we might actually expect you to talk to people." The operators chuckled on cue, not cruel but complicit. Lena didn't turn, didn't answer. Silence was her only reply. She knew how it unsettled them, how it carved a small fracture in the shield of easy arrogance Barrett wore like a uniform. Her screwdriver turned against a stubborn bracket. The console's panel came free with a soft pop, and beneath it the guts of the machine lay exposed. Bundles of wire, dust caked over connectors. She brushed it aside with careful hands, her focus absolute. That was when she saw it. A flicker, barely there, so faint it could have been dismissed as the dying hiccup of old tech. But Lena knew the language of machines. She knew their rhythms, their false starts, their quirks. This was different. The flicker stuttered with a rhythm, a pattern, something hidden so deeply that most would never even notice. Her pulse quickened. It couldn't be. Not here, not now. She leaned closer, her breath catching as the pattern repeated, faint but deliberate. It was a signature, one she hadn't seen in years, a ghost in the wires, and it spoke in a code she once knew better than her own name. Her hand stilled on the connector, her jaw tightening as memory struck hard. Nights lit only by the glow of monitors, fingers flying across keys while entire governments shifted in silence. A name whispered in channels that never officially existed. A shadow identity that had been erased, buried so deep no one should ever have found it again. Saber shadow. Lena forced her breathing steady, masking the storm inside. She reached for a grounding strap, the motion calm, routine, as though she were simply protecting against static. Across the room, Barrett was still spinning some story about a tech mishap and beers afterward, oblivious to the truth unraveling right under his nose. She locked the panel back into place, ran a standard systems check, and let the console hum back to life. To anyone watching, it was routine maintenance. To Lena, it was a wound torn open in the middle of a dusty comms room no one cared about. Later, when the night had emptied the wing and silence claimed the room again, she returned. The glow of the monitors lit her face in pale blues and greens. Her hands hovered above the keyboard, fingers trembling just once before she steadied them. The flicker was waiting. She traced it deeper, threading through layers of encryption as though she were following a scar across skin, twist after twist until she reached the center. Her breath held. The console blinked black. For 3 long seconds there was nothing, just the hum of servers, just her reflection faint in the glass. Then a voice. Cold, mechanical, familiar. "Welcome back, Saber Shadow." The words struck like a blow. Her chest tightened. A rush of memory threatened to break through, missions carried in silence, choices that had decided fates of people who never even knew her name, the sound of keys echoing in rooms no one admitted existed. She pressed her lips together, fighting the weight of recognition. Saber Shadow was dead, erased, deleted from files buried in places light never reached. And yet here it was, calling her back. The base outside slept, oblivious, but Lena knew something had shifted. Somewhere someone was listening, somewhere something had stirred. The next morning the comms wing buzzed as it always did. Operators clicked through routines, Barrett cracked jokes over burnt coffee, and the day unfolded in the rhythm of sameness. But for Lena, every sound was sharper, every glance heavier. She sat at her usual station, her fingers twitching, aching to test the console again. She didn't have to wait long. At 9:13, the room shuddered into chaos. Every monitor froze. Transmission feeds cut to static. Operators scrambled, their voices rising in panic. Barrett barked orders, his tone fraying as nothing responded. Reboot, run diagnostics. Nothing worked. Lena didn't ask permission. She slid into the chair, her fingers a blur, moving with a confidence that silenced the room. Barrett started toward her, but something in her eyes froze him mid-step. Focus, sharp, absolute. She bypassed protocols, diving into the encrypted sublayer she knew too well. The static vanished. Connections surged back online. And then, the voice again. "Welcome back, Saber Shadow." The words echoed through every speaker in the room. Silence fell. Operators stared, their confusion turning slowly toward fear. Barrett's smirk dissolved, his lips parting in disbelief. Captain Yates emerged from his office, his eyes fixed on Lena. "Everyone out," he ordered, his voice a blade. The operators hesitated, but they obeyed. Barrett lingered, sputtering about glitches and coincidences, but even he recognized the weight in the air. The door closed. Just Lena, just Yates, just the hum of the machines. Yates' voice was quiet now. "We thought Saber Shadow was gone." Lena leaned back, her arms folding, her face unreadable. "I was," she said softly, "until someone pulled me back in." His jaw tightened. He studied her as though seeing her for the first time. "This changes things." She didn't reply, she didn't have to. Because they both knew. Somewhere a signal had been sent. Somewhere a name thought buried had lit up again. And nothing, not silence, not time, not the life she had built here, could unmake that truth. And outside, Fort Vance carried on, unaware that in its forgotten wing, the past had just clawed its way back into the light. What was the cost of a single name? That question pressed against Lena Ortiz's ribs as the day folded into dusk. She walked out of the comms wing, toolbox heavy in her hand, the air outside sharp with the bite of late evening. Soldiers moved across the base with easy purpose, running drills, shouting cadence, carrying gear toward trucks that grumbled along supply lanes. Life went on. No one knew what had shifted inside the comms room hours before. No one but Captain Yates. No one but her. She paused just outside the doorway, drawing in the fading light like a secret. The sky glowed faintly orange at the horizon, clouds gathering as if to smother it. That was when she heard the low hum of an idling engine. Her eyes found it immediately. A black SUV sat parked by the curb, tinted windows hiding whoever waited inside. Its presence didn't need explanation. Vehicles like that never appeared without reason, and never without consequence. The door opened with precision. Two men stepped out in full dress uniform, their ribbons glinting faintly in the dying light. Their boots struck pavement in rhythm, each step deliberate, controlled, radiating the quiet authority of those who never had to repeat an order. The taller man, Colonel Arden, walked directly toward her. His eyes didn't flick to anyone else, not even to the cluster of soldiers who slowed nearby, drawn by the weight of the moment. "Ms. Ortiz," he said, not as a question, a confirmation, a recognition. She didn't answer. Arden raised his hand in a crisp salute, one she hadn't received in nearly a decade. It landed like a hammer. For a moment she simply stared, the gesture unlocking memories she had buried under years of silence. Slowly, reluctantly, she returned it. From the corner of her eye, Lena saw Barrett watching from the doorway, confusion tightening his face. Whispers passed from soldier to soldier like sparks. She felt them burning at her back. "We've been trying to locate Saber Shadow for years," Arden continued, his voice low, meant only for her. "Your signature lit up the network. You understand what that means." Her jaw clenched. 1,000 answers surged in her throat, but only one escaped. A single nod. That was enough. Arden stepped aside. The SUV door opened, inviting her into its silence. She climbed in without a word, the door closing behind her with a sound that felt final. Inside, the cabin smelled faintly of leather and something sterile, military air that had no warmth. The hum of the engine filled the space. Beside her, a second officer set a slim black case on her lap. Major Kell. His expression gave nothing away. "You remember the protocols," he said simply. Her hand hovered over the latch. For a moment she considered refusing, pretending she had forgotten. But denial was a luxury she had never allowed herself. The case opened with a click. Inside lay the tools of a life she had promised herself she'd never touch again. A custom-coded terminal drive, a worn ID badge that carried no expiration date, and a single patch stitched with the shadowed hawk insignia of a unit that didn't exist outside Whispers. Her thumb brushed the edge of the patch. Her chest tightened. Memories surged, rooms without windows, lines of code that toppled regimes, the faint click of a secure lock disengaging moments before chaos swept in. Her silence was her answer. The SUV moved. They drove to the far end of the base where blast doors loomed out of the ground, steel heavier than anything built for comfort. The earth seemed to vibrate as the doors pulled open. The vehicle slipped inside, swallowed whole by concrete and secrecy. The underground facility was a world apart. Dim lights glowed in blues and greens. Screens lined the command center, data streaming across them in endless columns. Operators worked at stations, their movements clipped, efficient. Yet as Lena walked through, conversations faltered, glances cut sideways. They had been briefed. They knew who she was. Or at least who she had been. She ignored their stares. She had long ago learned that attention was not respect. At the main console, she plugged in the terminal drive. Systems flickered, unlocking layer by layer until she reached a depth only she had ever known. The room hushed as lines of code scrolled across the screen. Something moved beneath the surface, fast, invasive, tearing through channels she had once mapped herself. It wasn't random. It was deliberate. A breach. "Someone's using my old ghost routes," Lena murmured. Arden leaned in. "Can you stop them?" Her fingers didn't hesitate. "I can find them." Keystrokes spilled like water. Commands traced through hidden tunnels, every line pulling the intruder closer into the light. Her face remained still, but inside the weight pressed heavier with each passing second. Whoever was behind this wasn't just skilled. They were intimate with her work. Finally, the map blinked. Coordinates resolved on the screen. Deep in hostile territory, a place that whispered danger in every contour. She locked it, tagged it, pulled the plug. "Target neutralized," she said softly. No applause, no cheers, just silence, the kind that carried respect unspoken. Arden's eyes met hers. He turned to the staff. "Log it, Operation Saber's return, success." At the back of the room, Lena saw him, Barrett. He had followed, unnoticed until now. His face was pale, his jaw tight, disbelief written across him like a confession. She caught his stare, held it for a second, then turned away. As she reached the door, Arden called after her, "Welcome home, Saber Shadow." She paused, the hum of the servers washing over her like a tide. Her hand rested on the doorframe. "I'm not here to stay," she said quietly. "I'm here to remind you, never underestimate the quiet ones." And then she stepped into the corridor, leaving behind a room full of people who would never see her, or anyone like her, the same way again. But as the door closed behind her, Lena's chest tightened, because she knew the truth. That wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. What happens when the ghosts you buried begin to move again? Lena asked herself that as the SUV carried her back through the winding tunnels of the underground facility, the hum of the engine low and steady beneath her feet. She kept her eyes forward, hands resting on her knees, but her mind was nowhere in that car. It was drifting back to the screen she just walked away from, to the map that had blinked alive with hostile coordinates, to the realization that someone somewhere was not just using her old routes, they were twisting them into something else. The thought sat in her chest like a stone. They had told her years ago that Saber Shadow was gone, that she was free to walk away, that her silence, her erasure, was the price paid for release, and she had believed them. She had built a life in the edges of anonymity, a contractor in coveralls with dust under her nails, just another pair of hands no one noticed. But the past had a way of clawing through dirt. Arden broke the silence first. "It's not random, Ortiz. Whoever they are, they want us to know they're out there." She didn't look at him. "They're not after you." His brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "They're after me." The words landed like a blow. The cabin stilled. Major Kell shifted slightly in the seat beside her but said nothing. The SUV pressed deeper into the tunnel. When they finally stopped, Lena stepped out into the stale underground air. Her boots struck concrete, echoing in the vast space of the hangar-like chamber. Banks of screens covered the walls, operators bent over keyboards, the glow of their monitors throwing long shadows across their faces. She felt their eyes again, felt the weight of whispered stories. Saber Shadow, a myth to some, a rumor to others, and now suddenly real flesh and blood standing in the middle of their command center. She ignored them and walked toward the main console. The moment her hands touched the keyboard, she was transported. Muscle memory guided her. She sifted through lines of code like a musician slipping back into an old song. Her silence deepened, the room falling into rhythm with the staccato of her keystrokes. And then she saw it again. The breach. A cascade of signals riding her old ghost routes, weaving through systems with precision she recognized too well. Whoever was behind it wasn't just skilled, they were intimate with her designs. It was like seeing her own handwriting, distorted by another's hand. She traced it, slowly, carefully, every keystroke peeling back another layer. And then she stopped. Because what blinked back at her wasn't just a location, it was a signature. Faint, fragmented, but there. A name she hadn't heard spoken in years. Shade. Her chest tightened. Shade had once been her partner, her equal, the only one who could match her step for step in the hidden corridors of digital war. Together, they had built ghost routes no enemy could penetrate. Together, they had vanished whole networks without leaving a trace. But Shade had been gone, lost in an operation that no one spoke of anymore. Or so she had believed. Her fingers froze above the keys. The room seemed to blur, the hum of servers fading to a distant echo. She saw instead the reflection of another time, Shade leaning against a desk, smirking through tired eyes, saying, "One day, Ortiz, someone's going to call us myths. Maybe that's the only way people like us survive." She swallowed hard. Arden leaned over her shoulder. "What is it?" Her voice was low, steady, though inside she trembled. "It's not just an intruder, it's someone I knew." Arden studied her face, reading the truth she didn't want to speak fully. And if it's really them, this isn't about your systems. It's about me." Silence stretched. Finally Arden straightened. "Then we find them and we end it." Lena's eyes lingered on the faint signature flickering across the map. The temptation to reach deeper was sharp, almost unbearable, to follow the trail all the way back, to know if it really was shade, to know if she had been wrong all these years. But she forced her hands away from the keyboard. Because she knew the truth. If she chased too far, she would fall back into the very shadows she had fought to escape. That night, when the facility emptied out and silence settled again, she stayed. Her reflection stared back at her from the darkened console screen. Her chest ached with a question she couldn't silence. If Shade was alive, what did that mean for Saber Shadow? For the first time in years, she felt fear. Not of enemies, not of capture or exposure, but of herself, of the pull she felt toward the life she had promised she would never return to. She pressed her palms flat against the cold metal of the console, her breath unsteady. "You don't belong here anymore," she whispered to herself. "You're supposed to be done." But even as she said it, the echo of Shade's signature lingered on the map in her mind, a faint light in hostile territory, a call she couldn't ignore. And in that silence, Lena realized the truth she had been running from. The past doesn't stay buried. It waits. How do you choose between silence and truth when both demand a sacrifice? That question kept Lena awake long after the underground facility had dimmed to its night cycle. She sat alone in the corner of her temporary quarters, a bare room with concrete walls and a cot too stiff to soften her exhaustion. The glow of a desk lamp traced sharp shadows across her face. In her hand, the black patch with the shadowed hawk insignia. She turned it over slowly, her thumb brushing its edge as though she could rub the past away. But the past was alive again, breathing, moving. Shade. She had seen the faint mark, the fragment of a signature hidden in the breach. A part of her wanted to dismiss it, to call it a trick of the system or a clever imitation. But she knew better. The rhythm, the precision, it was theirs. It had to be. Her stomach tightened. If Shade had survived, why wait until now? Why hide in hostile networks, weaving through ghost roots like an echo of the person she had once trusted most? The questions pressed at her like needles, sharp enough to pierce through the silence she wrapped around herself. She set the patch down, reached for the terminal drive still tucked in its case. For a moment she just stared at it, her reflection faint in the glossy surface. To pick it up meant leaning back into the shadows she had sworn off. To ignore it meant risking the ghosts would grow louder, bolder, until they consumed her anyway. The knock on her door was sharp. She slid the case shut, hiding the drive away. "Come in." Colonel Arden stepped inside, his presence filling the small room. His uniform was crisp even at this hour, his expression unreadable. He closed the door behind him, leaning against it as though the weight of the conversation needed walls to contain it. "We need to talk." Lena didn't move from her chair. "I guessed as much." Arden studied her, his eyes searching for cracks in the mask she wore. "The coordinates you traced, they're in territory controlled by people who would do anything to get their hands on you. They don't just want Saber Shadow's code. They want Saber Shadow herself." Her jaw tightened. "You're saying it's bait." "I'm saying it's personal." The word struck deeper than he realized. She lowered her gaze, her fingers curling against the edge of the desk. He was right. Shade's signature wasn't just a breach. It was a message. A hand extended out of the dark, pulling her toward something she wasn't ready to face. Arden stepped closer, his voice lower. We can assemble a team, strike at the coordinates, shut this down before it spreads." Lena looked up at him, her eyes hard. "And what if it's not just an enemy? What if it's someone who knows me better than you ever will? Someone who knows how I think, how I move, how I build." He paused, considering her words. "Then that's all the more reason you can't sit on the sidelines." Silence pressed heavy between them. Finally, Arden exhaled. "You don't have to answer now, but when you do, remember, running from who you are won't stop them. It only makes their shadow longer." When he left, the room felt smaller, colder. Lena sat motionless for a long time, her thoughts circling like hawks. She thought of Shade, the smirk, the sharp wit, the nights when they had worked side by side until their eyes burned. She thought of the day she had been told Shade was gone, the hollow silence that had followed, the way she had swallowed her grief and kept moving until grief became just another layer of her silence. And now, years later, a spark on a screen told her it might all have been a lie. Her hands shook as she reached for the drive again. She plugged it into the small terminal on her desk, the screen flickering alive. For a moment she hesitated, her chest tight, then her fingers moved, each keystroke a step back into the labyrinth she thought she had abandoned. She followed the ghost route again, her heart racing with each flicker of code. And then, there it was. The same fragmented signature, stronger this time, as if whoever was on the other end was waiting for her. Her breath caught. She typed quickly, embedding a query in the line of code, a question only Shade would recognize. "What do you remember about the night in Keller?" For a moment nothing happened, just the steady hum of the system, her reflection pale against the screen. Then a response, a cascade of numbers meaningless to anyone else, but to her they were coordinates. The ones Shade had whispered to her once, years ago, in a locked room after a mission no one else survived. Her throat tightened. It was them. It had to be. But before she could type again, the screen blinked black. The words appeared, stark and cold. "Not everything buried should stay dead. Come find me." Her hand hovered over the keyboard, trembling. And then the connection cut. The silence that followed was deafening. Lena pushed back from the desk, her heart pounding. Shade was alive. But what did that mean? Were they ally or enemy now? Why reach out through hostile networks instead of walking into the light? Questions flooded her, each one heavier than the last. She pressed her hands against her face, fighting the storm rising inside her. Fear, hope, guilt, determination. For years she had lived as if Saber's shadow had died, as if Lena Ortiz was all that was left. But now the truth clawed its way back, demanding a choice. Was she willing to follow the ghost of Shade back into the dark? Or was she strong enough to walk away, knowing silence would cost her more than ever before? She lowered her hands, her eyes narrowing, her breath steadying. There was no real choice, not for someone like her. The past had called, and she was already moving toward it. What if the person you trusted most became the one you feared most? That thought clung to Lena as she stepped back into the command center the next morning, her expression calm, her stride steady. No one in the room knew what she had uncovered during the night, but she carried it inside her chest like a fire no silence could put out. Shade, alive, sending messages through hostile systems as if daring her to follow. Colonel Arden was waiting, his arms folded, his gaze sharp as she approached. The others in the room fell silent, their glances flicking between them, whispers trailing like smoke. Everyone knew now that Saber's shadow had returned. No one knew what it meant. Arden gestured her toward the briefing room. She followed without a word, the door clicking shut behind them. He got straight to it. "We've analyzed the breach you traced. It wasn't just an incursion, it was an open invitation. Whoever it is, they wanted you to see it." She met his eyes. "It's not whoever, it's someone." Arden tilted his head, waiting. "Shade," she said quietly. The name felt strange on her tongue, like dust stirred after years of stillness. Arden blinked, but he didn't dismiss her. The partner you lost. She nodded once, or thought I lost. He exhaled, packing slowly across the room. If it really is Shade, then we're facing more than a breach. We're facing someone who knows your playbook as well as you do, maybe better, which means this isn't just about defending our systems anymore. It's about finding them before they find you. The words hung heavy in the air. Lena sat down at the edge of the table, her hands folded loosely in her lap. She forced her voice steady. Shade left me a message. They want me to come. Arden stopped packing, his eyes narrowing. And you're considering it. Silence stretched between them. Finally, she said, if I don't, they'll keep pulling me back until I do. This isn't something you can wall off with firewalls and protocols. This is personal. Arden studied her, his jaw tight. Then he leaned forward. If you go, you don't go alone. Her lips pressed together. The thought of a team, of Barrett, of young operators with no idea what they were walking into, made her stomach twist. Shade would cut through them like smoke. And yet, to go alone meant stepping straight into a trap with no safety net. Arden seemed to sense her hesitation. You're not the only one who knows what it means to carry ghosts, but you might be the only one who can face this one. Just don't mistake silence for strength. No one survives the shadows by themselves forever. That night, preparations began. A covert team assembled under Arden's direction. No insignias, no records. Operators who could vanish as easily as they appeared. Lena stood among them, her coveralls replaced by black fatigues she hadn't worn in years. The fabric felt strange against her skin, both familiar and foreign. Barrett was there too, not by choice. Arden had handpicked him. His smirk was gone, replaced by a wary stiffness. He avoided her eyes, but she felt his unease radiating. He didn't understand yet. Maybe he never would. Major Kell handed her a compact terminal, its edges worn smooth from years of use. You'll need this, he said. His voice was matter-of-fact, but his gaze lingered a second longer, as if he wanted to say more. She gave him a small nod. Hours later, under cover of darkness, the team lifted off in a silent transport. The engines hummed low, the cabin bathed in red light. Lena sat near the back, the terminal drive secure in her lap, her eyes closed as she fought the storm inside her. Shade's words echoed again. Not everything buried should stay dead. Come find me. Was it a trap, a warning, or a plea? The transport touched down on the outskirts of hostile territory, where the coordinates had pointed. A stretch of barren landscape stretched out under a starless sky, broken only by the jagged outline of an abandoned complex. The building looked hollow, but Lena felt the pull the moment her boots hit the ground. Shade was here. She could feel it like a vibration in her bones. The team moved cautiously, weapons raised, eyes scanning every shadow. Lena carried no rifle, only the terminal. Her weapon had never been metal or bullets. It had always been silence, precision, the unseen strike. They reached the entrance. The door hung open, darkness yawning inside. Arden gave a signal and the team swept in, clearing each corner with practiced efficiency. The rooms echoed with emptiness, dust, broken furniture, the faint smell of rust and damp. And then the lights flickered. Every monitor in the building, long dead and dust-covered, sprang to life at once. Lines of code spilled across them, cascading in patterns Lena knew too well. Shade's signature. The operators froze, their voices cutting short. Arden barked for calm, but Lena barely heard him. Her pulse thundered. She stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the screens. A message blinked into view. Welcome back, Shadow. Her throat tightened. She reached for the terminal, plugging it into the nearest console, her fingers moving with sharp certainty. Talk to me, she murmured under her breath as if Shade could hear. Tell me why. The screens pulsed, a cascade of data rearranged, forming words. You left me, they buried me, and now you pretend silence makes you free. Her chest constricted, the room blurred at the edges. It was Shade, it had to be. The cadence, the rhythm, it was their voice turned to code. Arden's hand landed on her shoulder, grounding her. Is it them? She nodded faintly. It's them. Another line scrolled. I kept the roots alive. I carried the shadows. And you, what did you carry, Ortiz? A toolbox, a quiet life. Her breath shuddered. She typed fast, each stroke an anchor. I carried the silence because someone had to. The reply came swift. Silence doesn't absolve you, it condemns you. The lights snapped off. The building plunged into darkness. The team's radios hissed with static. Someone cursed softly. Barrett's voice rose in panic, but Arden silenced him with a sharp gesture. Only Lena remained calm, her fingers still poised over the dead console. Because she knew the truth. Shade wasn't just alive. Shade was watching them. What do you do when the voice you once trusted becomes the one pulling you into the dark? The building remained swallowed in shadow, every monitor gone black, the hum of electricity severed as though a hand had gripped the wires and strangled them into silence. Lena's eyes adjusted slowly, her breathing steady even as the rest of the team shifted uneasily. Boots scraped on concrete. Weapons clinked faintly as fingers tightened on triggers. The silence was thick enough to feel. Shade was here, not in the room maybe, not in the flesh, but here. Arden's voice cut low through the darkness. Stay sharp, Ortiz talked to me. Lena crouched by the console, her fingers tracing the edge of the dead screen. They've cut the feed. This whole building is a trap, wired to answer only to them. Barrett hissed from the corner. So what now? We sit here until your ghost buddy decides to. Quiet, Lena snapped, her voice sharper than anyone had ever heard it. The sudden edge stunned even her. Silence fell again. In that silence, a sound emerged. Not static, not machinery, but something older. A soft click, then another, a rhythm. Footsteps. The team pivoted, rifles raised toward the far corridor. The sound grew louder, echoing off the walls until it filled the room. Lena's chest tightened. It wasn't possible. Shade was dead. Everyone had told her that. She had told herself that. And yet the footsteps came closer. The corridor glowed faintly as emergency lights sputtered awake. A figure emerged, hooded, face hidden in the dim glow. They moved with the same confidence Lena remembered, the same controlled rhythm of someone who had walked through shadows so long they became home. Her throat went dry. Shade. The figure stopped just inside the room. Slowly, they lifted their head. A half-mask covered their mouth, leaving only the eyes visible, eyes that caught the faint light with a sharpness that made her chest ache. Welcome back, Saber Shadow, the voice said, not mechanical now, not filtered through code, human, raw. Lena's knees nearly buckled at the sound. It was them. It had to be. But something was wrong. Shade's eyes weren't warm with recognition. They were cold, carved with something harder than betrayal. You left me. The words landed heavy, sharper than any weapon. Lena's chest constricted, her fingers curling into fists. They told me you were gone. There was nothing to find. Shade tilted their head, a faint smirk curling under the mask. Nothing to find, or nothing you wanted to face. Arden stepped forward, his voice iron. Whoever you are, this ends tonight. You can come in quietly or... Or what? Shade cut him off, their tone slicing. You'll lock me in a room like you did her. Use me until the silence suits you and then bury me alive. The operators shifted, confusion rippling through them. Lena felt the words pierce deeper than they realized. Shade wasn't wrong. What had the program been but a series of cages dressed as missions? What had silence been but another way of binding them? Lena's voice broke through the tension, softer than she intended. Why now? Why come back? Shade's eyes locked on hers. Because I was erased, and you walked free. Tell me, Ortiz, did freedom taste good while I rotted in the dark? The room swam. For a heartbeat she saw it all. The nights they had worked side by side, the jokes Shade whispered when exhaustion threatened to break them, the trust unspoken but absolute. She had carried that trust into her silence, believing Shade gone, but here they were alive, accusing her with every syllable. Her chest ached with something worse than fear, guilt. Arden motioned subtly to the team, a signal to close in, but Lena raised her hand. No. Every rifle froze mid-lift. She stepped forward, her boots echoing against the concrete. If you want me, Shade, you don't need them. This was always between us. Shade's eyes narrowed. For the briefest moment something flickered there, recognition, memory, and then it was gone, swallowed by cold resolve. Then follow me, they said. Before anyone could move, the emergency lights cut out. The room plunged into black. Gun safeties clicked off. Voices shouted in the dark. And Lena ran. She didn't think, just moved, her body following the rhythm of old instincts. Down the corridor, through the maze of concrete halls, chasing the faint echo of Shade's steps. The team called after her, but their voices blurred behind. This wasn't their fight. Not yet. Her lungs burned as she pushed deeper into the complex. Shade was always just ahead, close enough to hear, never close enough to see. A game, a test, a trap. Finally, she burst into a wide chamber, dim light seeping from broken fixtures above. Servers lined the walls, some dead, others flickering weakly. In the center stood Shade, waiting. Lena stopped several feet away, her chest heaving. Silence stretched between them. Shade's voice was quieter now, almost weary. Do you know what it's like to be erased, Lena? To hear the world move on without you while you sit in the dark, waiting for someone, anyone, to remember. Her voice trembled despite her control. Every day, I lived that silence too. No, Shade said sharply, stepping closer. You escaped it. I was buried in it. And now I'll make them remember what they tried to forget. Lena's throat tightened. This wasn't just about betrayal, it was about survival. Shade wasn't reaching for power, they were reaching for vengeance. She whispered almost to herself, what have we become? Shade tilted their head, eyes glinting. Exactly what they made us. And in that moment, Lena understood. She hadn't come here to find Shade. She had come here to face the part of herself she had spent years denying. The shadows weren't just Shade's, they were hers too. The question was no longer whether she could stop them. It was whether she should. What if stopping someone else meant destroying the last piece of yourself? That question followed Lena into the hollow chamber where Shade stood, their figure cut sharp by the faint, broken light above. The silence between them was thick, layered with years of trust, betrayal, and grief. Every step Lena took closer felt like stepping into a mirror she had avoided for nearly a decade. Shade's eyes didn't leave hers. They told you I was gone, you believed them. Her breath was unsteady, but her voice was firm. I had to believe, otherwise I wouldn't have survived. Shade's laugh was soft, bitter, echoing off the server towers. Survival, that's what you call hiding in coveralls, tightening bolts while the world forgets your name. That's not survival, Lena. That's surrender. The words cut deep. She clenched her fists, fighting the sting of truth in them. Shade wasn't wrong. She had chosen silence, anonymity, disappearing into work no one valued. But wasn't that what peace was supposed to look like? Arden's voice crackled suddenly over her earpiece, static lacing his tone. Ortiz, hold position. We're moving to you. She touched the earpiece lightly but didn't respond. Her eyes stayed locked on Shade. This wasn't a battle Arden or his men could fight. This was hers. Shade tilted their head. They're listening. Good, let them hear. Without warning, the servers around them roared to life. Screens flickered, code spilling like fire across their surfaces. Shade's work. Lena recognized the structure instantly. Her old ghost roots, twisted and sharpened into something unrecognizable. Data streams surged outward, carrying invasive signals aimed at networks far beyond this broken facility. It wasn't just a breach, it was a broadcast, a declaration. Stop this, Lena demanded, stepping forward. You're painting a target on yourself. No, Shade replied, their voice hard. I'm painting it on all of us. They can't bury us if the whole world sees the shadow. Lena's chest tightened. Shade wasn't just lashing out. They wanted exposure, to drag the hidden past into the light no matter the cost. Her voice broke raw. And what about the innocents caught in the crossfire? The ones who don't even know these shadows exist? Shade's gaze flickered just for a second, a crack, but it closed fast. Collateral like we were. Lena shook her head slowly. No, I won't let you turn us into monsters just to make them remember. Her hands hovered over her terminal, the drive ready. Shade noticed, their eyes narrowing. You'd stop me. Her heart twisted. Memories flooded in, their laughter in rare moments of calm, the way they had trusted each other with secrets no one else could bear, the unspoken bond forged in silence. To fight Shade felt like tearing out the last thread of who she used to be. But Shade wasn't reaching for her hand anymore. They were reaching for chaos. She swallowed hard. If I have to. The air between them grew electric, charged with the inevitability of what was coming. Shade's fingers danced over their console, code surging faster, darker. Lena mirrored them, her hands steady though her chest shook. Two shadows locked in a silent duel, every keystroke echoing like a blow. Lines of defense fell, rebuilt, collapsed again. Shade pressed harder, their eyes alive with fury, with hurt, with something almost pleading beneath it. Why are you fighting me, Lena? We were supposed to be the same. Her fingers didn't stop. We were. That's why I know how dangerous you've become. Shade slammed another string of code through the system. Sparks flew from one of the old servers, the smell of burnt circuits filling the air. Lena countered, rerouting the surge, isolating the broadcast, caging it inside layers of encryption she had built years ago. For a heartbeat, Shade froze, recognizing the trap. Their eyes flared with something like betrayal. You'd cage me again. Her voice cracked as tears threatened. I'd save you if I could, but you won't let me. The room shook with the force of the digital storm. Arden's voice barked in her ear, urgent, demanding updates, but she tuned him out. This wasn't theirs. This was hers. Shade's hands slowed, frustration creeping into their movements. Lena pressed harder, not with speed, but with precision. Every keystroke was a memory of who they had been together, every line of defense written with the quiet hope that Shade would see reason. Finally, the system groaned and stilled. The broadcast cut. Screens flickered back to darkness. Silence. Lena's chest heaved as she pulled her hands from the keys. Her body trembled, not from exhaustion, but from the weight of what she had done. Shade stood motionless across from her. The mask hid their mouth, but their eyes burned with something she couldn't name. You really chose them, Shade whispered. After everything, you chose silence over me. Her voice broke. I chose the world. Shade's gaze lingered on her long enough for her to see the storm breaking behind their eyes. Pain, anger, maybe even sorrow. Then they stepped back, retreating into the shadows of the chamber. Then we are enemies now. And just like that, Shade was gone. Lena's knees nearly gave out, but she caught herself, one hand braced on the cold console. Her throat tightened with the scream she refused to release. Shade wasn't dead. Shade wasn't saved. Shade was lost to something darker. And she had just drawn the line between them. What if the person you were meant to save could only be stopped? That question sat heavy in Lena's chest as the transport cut through the night sky, carrying her and the team back toward Fort Vance. She sat in silence, her body rigid in the red cabin light, her hands still trembling from the duel with Shade. The terminal drive rested in her lap, but it felt heavier now, as though every line of code she had written pressed down on her bones. Across the cabin, Barrett watched her. His usual arrogance was gone, replaced by something quieter, confusion, maybe fear. He opened his mouth once, then closed it again as if he had questions but couldn't find the words. Arden, seated beside him, gave no such hesitation. "They won't stop," he said flatly. "You know that." Lena didn't answer. Her gaze stayed fixed on the floor, where shadows danced with the vibration of the engines. Arden leaned forward, his voice low. "Shade isn't just a breach. They're a weapon turned loose, and weapons don't put themselves back in the box." Her jaw tightened. She wanted to argue, to insist that beneath the cold mask and burning eyes there was still the person she remembered. But the truth clawed inside her. Shade had made their choice, and if she didn't face it, others would pay. When the transport landed, the base looked the same as it always had, floodlights cutting across the tarmac, guards moving with routine precision, the comms wing sitting quiet like an old dog in the corner. But for Lena, nothing was the same. She had carried silence for years, and now it was shattered. Everyone who looked at her knew. Saber's shadow wasn't just a ghost anymore. The debrief ran long into the night. Arden pressed her for every detail, Shade's voice, Shade's words, Shade's methods. She gave him what she could, but not everything. Some things weren't data. Some things were wounds. When the room finally emptied, Lena found herself alone again, the terminal glowing faintly before her. She hesitated, then keyed in a single command. The screen filled with encrypted fragments, residue from the battle. Among them, one line pulsed faintly. "Not everything buried should stay dead." Her throat tightened. Shade had left it behind on purpose, a reminder, a threat, or both. The following days blurred together. Teams scrambled to fortify networks. Analysts pored over captured code. Officers whispered in corridors about the ghost who had returned only to find her reflection staring back at her in the dark. Barrett, once dismissive, avoided her entirely now, his smirk gone as though swallowed by the weight of what he had witnessed. But Lena's silence grew heavier with each sunrise. Every night she returned to the console. Every night she chased faint traces of Shade's work, fragments scattered across networks like breadcrumbs. And every night she wrestled with the question she didn't dare voice aloud. Was she searching to stop them or to find them? The answer came one evening, unbidden. The console flared to life. Shade's signature appeared, not hidden this time, not buried. A direct signal, a location. Coordinates. Her breath caught. This wasn't bait, this wasn't a taunt, it was a summons. She stood, her chair scraping softly against the floor. Her hands shook as she gathered the drive, the patch, the badge with no expiration date. She didn't tell Arden. She didn't tell anyone. Some battles were too personal for orders. Hours later, she moved through the abandoned outskirts of a ruined city, her boots crunching glass underfoot, the air thick with the stench of rust and rain. The coordinates led her to a skeletal tower, its windows shattered, its walls streaked with years of decay. Inside, the air was damp, heavy with silence. She climbed the stairs slowly, each step echoing into the hollow dark. Her chest ached with every beat. At the top, in a room stripped bare of everything but dust and shadows, Shade waited. They stood by the broken window, moonlight cutting across their mask. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, Shade turned. Their voice was quiet, almost human again. "You came." Lena swallowed hard. "I had to." They studied her, their eyes softer than before. "You still believe you can save me?" Her voice trembled. "I believe you're still worth saving." For a heartbeat, something flickered in their eyes, something that looked like the partner she remembered. The one who once smirked at midnight over stale coffee, who once whispered secrets no one else could hold. But then it was gone. "You don't understand," Shade said, stepping closer. "This isn't about us anymore. This is about making them see. The world thinks silence is safety. I'll show them silence is a lie." Lena's chest tightened. "And how many have to burn for that lesson?" Shade's gaze hardened. "All of them, if that's what it takes." The words struck like a blade. She saw then that she had already lost the person she had come to find. Shade wasn't calling her back to rebuild what they had. Shade was calling her to witness what they had become. Her hands shook as she reached for the drive, the weight of choice pressing harder than ever. To stop Shade meant killing the last piece of herself that had ever believed in connection, in trust. But to let Shade continue meant watching the world drown in the same silence they had both been buried in. Tears burned her eyes as she whispered, "I'm sorry." Shade tilted their head, the faintest hint of a smile curling under the mask. "So am I." The duel was silent, furious, final. Keys clattered, codes surged, sparks spat from dying machines. They moved like mirrored shadows, each anticipating the other, each cutting, blocking, countering. It wasn't just skill. It was memory against memory, trust against trust. But Lena fought with something Shade no longer carried. Restraint. Hope. The faint belief that silence could still protect, still heal if not for them, then for others. And in the end, it was enough. The system collapsed. Shade's code disintegrated into fragments, scattering like ashes across the network. The monitors went dark, leaving only the sound of Lena's ragged breath. When the dust settled, Shade stood swaying, their hands trembling. They looked at her one last time, eyes burning with something she would never forget: pain, betrayal, love twisted into rage. Then they turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving nothing but silence behind. Lena sank to her knees, her chest heaving, her hands trembling against the cold floor. Tears slipped free, silent, unstoppable. She had won. And yet it didn't feel like victory. It felt like loss. When she returned to Fort Vance, no one asked for details. Arden studied her eyes, saw the storm in them, and said nothing. Barrett stared at her once, then looked away. The base hummed as always, soldiers running drills, trucks rumbling, coffee burning. Life moved on. But Lena carried the silence differently now. Not as escape, not as surrender, but as a shield for the ones who would never know how close the shadows had come. She sat once more at the old console in the comms wing, her toolbox beside her, her coveralls rolled at the sleeves. To the others she was furniture again, quiet, unseen. But somewhere she knew Shade still lived, and somewhere the shadows would stir again. Her lips pressed together, steady now. Because silence wasn't weakness, it wasn't surrender. It was strength. And sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.